fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simonds. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simonds, like diamonds. We are back. Got a really special one here with my bro, Luke Simonds.
Oh yeah, here and ready to rock, Joe.
Dude, you're supposed to say like diamonds.
That was a week like diamonds. I mean, you set me up all wrong.
I was encouraging you to do it the correct way, but so you're moving today, huh?
Yeah, I'm actually on the road right now, moving from Placida up to St. Petersburg, Florida. Looking forward to exploring some new waterways, man. I'm pumped.
And you're going to be on the water? Is that what I heard? I haven't seen the place yet.
Yeah, so I'll be on the water, so a lot more videos, and just everything's going to be easier. So more videos on the water, and then I'll have a little studio set up so I can do more line tests, where I was doing like the line and knot tests. So I'll be able to kick out a lot more content much faster. So definitely the YouTube channel will be getting a lot more action, and as well as obviously our website, the fishing tips. So I'm basically set myself up to have like the perfect setup for really taking this all to the next level. So I'm really pumped. It's going to be a pain to move in there, but it'll all be worth it once it's all settled in.
Cool. And then obviously the insiders will be getting even more insider reports from you every week. And if you guys don't know what that is, that's kind of how the whole Insider Club started. Was people said, "Hey, I'd pay you, Luke, to see where you're fishing every week and show your pre-trip plan and almost kind of break it down like game film in football." Where, after you pre-trip plan, fish, and then afterwards look at the footage and look at mistakes, look to see where the bait was, kind of recap what worked, what didn't work, and then obviously the trends on how to replicate it in your area. And now the sucker is, man, kind of exploded here the past, really just the past 6 months. We busted through 10,000 members, and now we have multiple people doing these reports. And there are new regional reports from Texas to Virginia going up every stinking hour, probably every 10 minutes. It's nuts. Crazy.
Yeah, it's been awesome watching it grow. Yeah, it really just started with me, and then we got Tony on board doing these reports, and then we set up a platform that's for the club members that the members can do their own reports, and that's been crazy, just watching that grow, and it's been awesome seeing how many members are posting their own reports and not just saying, "Hey, I caught this fish. Look at me, how awesome I am!" Right? They're actually giving like really helpful tips and real-time intel on what's working, and that's really helped this club just totally skyrocket, even in non-Florida states. So it's been really cool watching it grow.
So if you're not a member, you need to go to saltstrong.com. That's saltstrong.com and join completely risk-free today. I want to talk real quick about kind of a story that you did recently that ties in with what the topic of today is, which is late fall, early winter. And, I see a lot of people, obviously I kind of browse through our Facebook group and some other ones, and, people are complaining about a little red tide, and it's never fun, a topic. And then even just, it's getting cold out and the fish, they're not biting, they have lockjaw. And we used to falsely believe that forever. We kind of just gave up in the winter, falsely believing that, the fish weren't biting and they were all just huddled up like bears hibernating. And that ain't true at all. In fact, I think you'll probably agree wintertime is one of your favorite times to fish. Yeah, weather can be a little unpredictable, but fishing can be incredibly hot and predictable. And tell the story about Nick. So you had a friend come in town in an area where the red tide had just started. So that excuse was there, certainly, had you got skunked, but you didn't. And you have a young kid. How old is Jacob? 9, 10?
He just turned 12. Yeah, it was
12,
his 12th birthday, and so they made the trip over.
So you got a 12-year-old. You're using all artificial lures.
Yep.
And you guys caught I don't know, how many different species?
To be honest, I didn't count, but it was probably, I'm guessing like 7 or 8, maybe 9. I don't know. It really just, little young Jacob just wanted to go out and catch fish. And so the goal, we weren't trying to catch trophies. And so the game plan, was adjusted accordingly, right? So the goal was just to get a lot of action, to have as few gaps where you're not catching anything as possible. And so that was the game plan, to set up a game plan, and then had to make some pivots based on the red tide. But again, without a game plan, you don't know what to pivot and if it worked or not. So had a plan, made some changes, and then had a really good time all 3 days. Then a cold front came in too. So the last day it was a cold front plus red tide, which would be a time that I'd never would even consider going out. And we ended up having a really fun trip, caught a lot of fish and even in spite of the rough weather.
So obviously, if you're an insider, you get to actually see all of our spots and where we fished. For the rest of the people who aren't, what were the trends? Like what kind of depth were you in? Where were you finding the most fish, the most feeding fish?
Yeah, well, the goal up front, and another thing I was doing, I have some crab traps, and so I wanted Jacob to kind of just experience that, and that's just a lot of fun. So the goal of the first day was, hey, let's just catch some ladyfish and find a spot that just has a lot of ladyfish and trout and jacks, just to have a bunch of action. And even if the only thing we caught were ladyfish, it still would have been a success, because that would be some good bait for the crab traps. And so what I focused on was basically the channels, area called Bull Bay. So we were fishing in near Charlotte Harbor, area called Bull Bay. It's basically, for those who aren't familiar with it, there's a lot of backwater, a lot of islands, a lot of little small bays and cuts, and then it basically will empty out into Charlotte Harbor, which is then the bigger body of water that eventually empties out into the Gulf. And the trend at that time was that just there's a lot of bait fish moving around. So when there's a lot of movement going on, it's really smart to really focus on the channels, right? The areas where the water is moving in and out. And because that's literally based on the move, right? They're moving through the channels, and just focusing on the channels is going to guarantee that you have, that you maximize your odds of success. And so that's all we did. So I just found some channels, and then in particular, I was looking for channels that had various forms of structure. If you've heard any of our lessons or webinars, it's if you want to maximize your results, you maximize your structure, meaning get to areas that have structure like seagrass on the bottom. That's a form of structure. Oyster bars, obviously, form of structure. Even just like trees in general, docks, even depth changes. Like literally anything other than this flat sand could be something that a fish could use to ambush prey. And so this particular channel that I went to had depth changes. Obviously, that's check 1. Had seagrass around it. That's number 2, another form of structure. And then also just a lot of current, like a lot of current flow. So it wasn't like a spot that I'd be going for trophy fish, which would generally have more than just those 2 things. But I was just looking for action. And so the fact that bait was running, this area had a lot of current, plus it had some depth changes and seagrass. Then that was all I needed to know to make a stop there, and we caught an absolute ton of fish. Yes, a lot of them were ladyfish, but I bet we caught at least 30 or 40 trout, many of which would have been keeper. The trout got hit pretty hard with red tide last year, so you can't keep them. But it's a lot of them were over 15 inches. None of them were huge. Like we didn't catch anything over 20 inches. But we definitely caught some respectable ones. Another cool thing is get spots like that. There's just going to be a lot of opportunity to catch fish, because areas like that with structure and current, you're going to have the ambush predators there, like sea trout in this case, but you also have a lot of the roamers going in and out. And so Jacob caught a giant pompano, and so we kept that. That was a really nice dinner. It was one of the biggest pompano I've ever seen. So like, a benefit of that is you have some fun bycatch. Sometimes cobia, we end up jumping 2 tarpon in those 3 days we were fishing. So tarpon are moving around. They're going through those same channels. And so when you're fishing there, the cool thing is first of all, you have a lot of action. And then number 2, although most of the action is smaller fish, there's an opportunity to hook into some really nice fish, even like a fish of a lifetime. One of the tarpon was definitely over 100 pounds. And unfortunately shook the jig out, but the opportunity was there, and it was just a really good time.
And you guys were 100% artificial lures?
Yeah, I mean, we just threw those slam shady paddle tails, and just because it's effective, it's easy. Like there's no, you don't have to be like an expert at artificial lures to have success. Young Jacob was on fire. He caught a ton of fish all by himself, like casting by himself, doing the retrieve, hook set, everything. And it's first of all, it's super effective even for advanced anglers, but it's something that you can get somebody who's new or inexperienced, who's not the best caster, and they cast a good distance. Just a simple reel-in retrieve can get the job done, although, we were obviously doing some varying the retrieve based on the conditions, but yeah, so just the slam shady paddle tail, that was literally all we used the whole time, and caught just a ton of fish with it. But it wasn't attributed to the paddle tail itself. Obviously, it does help to have a good lure. It was more just like anything, just like people are having a good or bad day. It's rarely due to the lure used. It's almost always attributable, at least most attributable, to the actual spot, to being at the right spot at the right time.
Love it, dude. So one other thing too, in terms of finding the right spot / time of day, I had Dave Audie on here, and he talked about how reliant he is on smartfishingtides.com. So that's the website that we help build, really customized for inshore saltwater anglers. So it's smartfishingtides.com. And what was interesting is, Dave obviously talked about, looking at the wind and the tides, and we got a strike score that really is predictive analysis on when is going to be the best bite, both day and time of day. But he talked about how powerful the little thing at the bottom, what sonar from Navionics, in terms of looking at depths and finding little pockets that he hadn't seen before. Are you using that?
Not much. I mean, because at least for most of the year, especially summertime, I'm generally up in the
clarify,
shallows.
you're using smart fishing tides every day, just not the sonar part.
Oh, right. Yeah, I use smart fishing tides for every trip. I mean, it's just the most efficient way to get everything you need. It's all in one spot. The sonar in particular, lately I've been fishing areas with pretty clear water, and I've been specifically targeting redfish and snook up in the shallows. And so with that, I just use Google Maps, right? Like the Google Map portion of it, the satellite imagery information. I don't rely on Navionics. And so the Smart Fishing Tides has the Google Analytics map built into it. And it's just all right there. It's super easy to use. So that's literally all I use now. And because then you just scroll up and you can see what the tide's doing. You can see what the wind's doing. And then you just, okay, I know which way the wind's going to be blowing. I know which way the current's going to be moving. And okay, now let me pick some spots. Let me go identify. Obviously, I'll know the type of spot to go to based on, my latest reports, plus just looking through the community to see what everybody's getting the most action on. And then I'll literally just go to, the map and then find the same type of spot that everybody's been reporting is working. Whether it's the wind-blown shoreline or the wind-protected shoreline or areas with like points with current hitting it, whatever the case is, obviously it changes throughout the year, and really, so that's literally the easiest way to do it.
Cool. I lost you there for a second.
Sorry, lost me.
Yep.
What part did you miss?
I don't know, because I couldn't hear what you were saying. But no, you mentioned going to to the map on the Insider Club after using the Smart Fishing Tides and seeing if they're looking at wind-blown shorelines, et cetera. So that leads me to the next question on this. So late fall, early winter in general. Obviously, it's getting cooler. You've got more sustained cold fronts. It's not just like a day here or there. And obviously, if you're in South Florida, maybe it's still overall kind of warm. But like, what kind of areas are you looking for? What kind of depths? I know a lot of people, even like CA, some of the things that we did with him, he talks about the gentleman's start of, not having to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and be up early. Although I know you still love that morning bite. What are you doing in the late fall, early winter here?
Yeah, so I mean, it's still too early to be in total gentleman start mode, because although the air is colder, the water still isn't like cold yet. Like the fish aren't in total winter mode, and so in the core of winter, I'm definitely sleeping in, but I'm still now I'll still get out in the water early, and although the flats on the shallow water, if it's like under 1.5 feet or 2 feet. And a cold front comes in, in many cases, the fish will shift off, like snook and redfish, and even trout in some instances will kind of shift out into a little bit deeper water, but they'll still be feeding, and they'll be pushing up pretty fast as soon as the sun comes out. So like that day that, I guess the last day that Jacob and Nick were in town, a cold front just pushed through like the night before. It dropped significantly. It's probably like a 15-degree drop. Yes, the water kind of got chilled a little bit, but by about 8 o'clock, once the sun finally came out, I mean, within 15 minutes, the bite really turned on. We even put the saltwater. Actually, I guess, and for a little bit we did change lures. We some snook were popping, and so we put Jacob on a skitter walk, and he didn't catch a snook, but he jumped off too, and that was at like probably 10 o'clock. So it's not like the summertime where you have to be throwing top water in the morning if you're going to be using top water. The bite will often turn on as soon as that water just starts warming up a hair.
Cool. Did you have to shift? Meaning, were you a little bit deeper, and all of a sudden now you're in that 3 foot or less, or no?
Yeah, that again, it really depends on what you're going after. Like the bigger snook and the bigger redfish will generally like be in the passes themselves, a little bit deeper water, and then in many cases they'll shift up in shallows. If it's really cold, a lot of times some of the bigger fish will hunker down in the deeper channels, like 6 feet or more. And then once the sun comes up, they'll shift up and start taking advantage of some of the warmer water and shift up onto the flats. But in many cases, the smaller fish, like slot-sized redfish and most trout, will generally, like, I feel like they don't move nearly as much, especially this early in the season. So trout, those days fishing with Nick and Jacob, trout were in the same spots basically every day, both before and after the front. After the front, they pushed off, I mean, just a hair deeper, but it was like hardly noticeable. And the redfish, pretty much they all have the same. Again, it was one of the first fronts. The water didn't get totally zapped. Like, it wasn't like the water was freezing cold. It was just a little bit cooler. The sun came out the next day, and like everything was back to normal. Really, after like by the end of the day, it was fish were in the exact same spots.
Cool. I got a question on the lures. So I had someone recently mention that they had caught more fish using the Slam Shady paddle tail this past summer and even early fall than ever before, like any given year. And yet they were going to change it up and go darker for the wintertime. Thoughts there? Because I said, why would you try to switch up something that you have more confidence in than ever before? And he's like, I don't know. It's just kind of what I've always done. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I guess I don't focus too much on lure color, to be honest. I like to just find one that I like, that I know, like, and trust, and just stick with it. So for me, if I want to emulate a bait fish, I go with Slam Shady now. I used to go with white, but Slam Shady, I do like Slam Shady better. It's like, it's white. If it doesn't have seen, it's white with both silver and gold flash to it, just a hint of it. So it just gives a little bit more a little bit more flash without being just totally obnoxious. And so that's all I use. So if I'm imitating the bait fish, I'm using that. And if I'm imitating a shrimp or something like that, that is almost always going to be dark, then I'll go darker. And that, so far, the Slam Shady, I've used it in watercolors of all different colors, all different shades, and that white color does a really good job because, I mean, the science behind it is because the white lure, white just reflects whatever is in between the fish and the lure. And so it basically automatically matches the color of the water, which is what all of the bait fish are naturally doing themselves, right? So if it's dark water, right, the lure, a white lure is 2 feet away, that lure is going to look dark because the dark water is in between the fish and the lure. Does that make sense? So it'll automatically look like the bait fish that are in the area because those bait fish are literally designed and built to actually mimic the water. As you'll see, if you go net some mullet or white bait and you're in dark water and you're on a grass flat and then you put them in a live well, right, like a live well with white walls. Look in there about 30 minutes later, and those fish are going to be a lighter color. They just automatically change color based on their surroundings. So this white lure, basically does the same thing, and the fact that we have the extra flash in there just kind of makes it stand out a little bit more than everything else. So, long story short, I really like a white color for imitating bait fish. If I'm seeing a lot of bait fish in the area, that's what I'm throwing. If I'm not seeing bait fish, and if it's pure winter time, so like in the middle of winter when the bait fish are at the lowest point of any time of the year, that's when I'll go to a shrimp pattern. And I like either green, just like a watermelon green is good. Also like that DOA. One of my favorite dark lures is that DOA 4-inch DOA jerk. It's the one I caught that snook off the balcony with. And it's basically the only time I use it is the wintertime, but I really like it for maybe 2 months, maybe 1 or 2 months. And it's the beer with the chartreuse tail. For whatever reason, I have confidence in it. Whether it works better than the others, I can't say for certain, but that's the one that I know, like, and trust for the days that they're just not many bait fish around, and the fish are not hooning on bait fish; they're hooning on shrimp or any sort of crustacean, even seahorses. Big trout will eat those things. So just a darker lure that's taken through seagrass or right along the bottom that imitates what those fish are feeding on. That will generally get some good results.
Cool. Let's talk about speed. I know you and I both grew up as bass anglers, and when wintertime came around, we slowed down quite a bit. In some cases, to the point it was tough for me to fish because I don't have as much patience as you do. What are you doing? What are you doing in terms of retrieve speed and let's just say late fall or early wintertime?
Well, in general, as the water gets colder and colder, this is going to be more important. So in getting up early, the water's cold. The fish are going to be a little bit more lethargic. If you're not seeing, strikes up on the surface, odds are the fish are going to be pretty lethargic. And so the slower, the better, right? And so I'll get a jig on or a jerk bait, and I'll be taking it slow, basically as slow as possible without getting snagged on the bottom. And then also but it still needs to be fast enough to cover water, right? If I'm just looking for fish, I'll move fast. But then as soon as I see fish or signs of fish, then I'll slow down and really, really pay attention to adjusting the retrieve speed and the retrieve tempo, right? Like twitches versus no twitches. Some faster, some slower. Figure out what they're reacting to best, and then stick with it and apply it going forward. So, but in general, my default, so, you need to start with a default to know, at least where to start. So my default for winter is I'll start slow, right? Early in the morning, the water's cold. I'm not seeing much water movement as far as bait fish or predator fish moving around. I'm gonna assume that they're gonna prefer a slower retrieve, and I'll go slow. to start, and then I'll adjust it around and see if they actually do like a fast one. But, in many cases, as the water's warming, they're actually going to get sometimes the bite will like really turn on. And in that case, if you're going too slow when the fish are really aggressive, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities. So it's important to, again, just be mindful, keep an eye out on the actual, any sort of feeding activity, right? Especially if you see fish popping up on the surface, faster is better. But if you're not seeing anything, if it's just looking like nothing's moving, then you're either in a bad spot, which is the case many times, or the fish are just really lethargic. They're not moving. They're cold. And so get something slow, take it on the bottom. Don't be throwing topwater at that in those cases. Get something that's on the bottom. Most of the feeding happens on the bottom. So put your lure down the bottom, take it slow. And it's even more important to use something that's scented in that instance as well, because those fish, a lot of times they're not going to be traveling very fast. The bait's not moving fast. They do have a little bit more time to if it's in a heavily pressured area, they're going to be analyzing it a little bit more than they would otherwise. And so every little advantage helps.
Cool. Let's talk docks. That seems to be a great place all year long, but I know in that wintertime we seem to have success in docks that have some deeper cuts around them. Thoughts on fishing the docks?
I love dock fishing. So docks, that's something that I really fish all seasons. So the pro is that there's always fish around docks. Docks are an extremely good form of structure. The bad news is that they can be really tough to get big fish out of, right? Because it's just guaranteed that if you're looking at a big fish, they have multiple pilings to wrap your line around and totally snap it. But wintertime in particular is when I probably fish docks more than any other time. And the reason why I like it is because we have the big temperature swings, right? So at night, it can get down and, at whatever the number is at night, we'll get down to a cold number. And then if the sun comes out during the day, the water can really heat up. And so those fish will often change depths, throughout the temperature changes. And what docks allow them to do is to change depths without exposing themselves to like the top predators like dolphin sharks. So they can basically change depth without going away from the safety of the pilings. That makes sense. So it's a really good form of structure for fish. They're often going to be there, and when they're there, they really hold by them, and they just go toward the deep part of the dock during some cases, and then they'll shift up towards the land in other cases. But they can do all of that without exposing themselves to danger. So I love fishing docks. In wintertime, I really all season I'll throw mostly jigs. I don't really like throwing plugs on docks because, again, if you hook into a big fish, you're going to lose a $15 plug or $10 plug. Whereas if you just have a jig head with a soft plastic on it, worst case, if you get it broken off, it's going to be like $1.50. And they're super effective. And more importantly, they can be rigged weedless. So I love using weedless jigs around docks. You can cast more aggressively without worrying about getting snagged, and they just flat out catch fish. And so keeping a jig up under dock in the wintertime is a really smart play, and it just takes a little bit of time on first of all finding a good dock, and then secondly is identifying the zone, right? Like where the most of the action is happening. Is it in 5 feet of water? Is it in 3 feet of water? Is it in a foot and a half? Is it like right on the shoreline? That's just the kind of stuff that you have to be mindful of when you're fishing docks.
Cool. Let's talk about bait, and not necessarily using live bait, but just finding the bait, because a lot of times you find the bait, schools of bait, you find some predator fish, but those seem to be not as prevalent in the wintertime. And talk about that in terms of kind of identifying, this is now on the water, obviously. You found a good place off the water. You did your pre-trip planning. You went to smartfishingtides.com. Let's just say you found an area with some docks. how important is finding schools of bait or mullet or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I mean, it's always important, and there's always going to be some around. So I'm always looking for bait fish. Even in the coldest of months, there's still going to be some bait fish around. They don't just totally go away. So yeah,
I thought they were like the bears. I thought they hibernated.
Yeah, they're not hibernating.
Ah, great.
Yeah, and so I mean, I'm rarely out trying to catch bait, but like pinfish, for example, they are, you know, the white bait, you know, the pilchard type bait are at their lowest. There's still some, but there's just not nearly as much as the you know, the summer, for instance. But I feel like pinfish really come in. I feel like they're a lot easier to catch, and I see a lot more flashing in many cases during the winter months. So a lot of pinfish around. That's a good time to use spoons. Like, I think spoons significantly, or at least I believe that a lot of the fish assume that a spoon is a pinfish, just because if you look at a pinfish when they're feeding on the bottom or feeding the grass, they're kind of just doing like the same type of flashes that a spoon does. So I like using spoons during the wintertime for that exact reason. Also like shrimp patterns, because that's going to be what a lot of fish are eating. The shrimp will usually more prevalent in the wintertime. So as far as the bait fish, though, back to your question, I'm not out there to catch bait fish, but I'm always on the lookout for them. Mostly first of all, I want to see some just to make sure that I'm in a good spot. If there's no bait fish at all, then the odds are that I'm not in a good spot. Like the fish aren't there. And so I use bait fish as the barometer, if you will, on deciding, okay, like, am I in a feeding zone or am I not in a feeding zone? And then, you know, then I'll just try to be mindful of the type of bait and the size of bait, just to make sure that I'm using the right lure, right? If I'm seeing a bunch of bait fish that are all 3 inches long, I want to be using a bait fish imitation lure that's about 3 inches long. But if they're all 6 inches long, right, I don't want to have a little 3-incher, because they're not going to waste energy getting a 3-inch bait if there's a ton of bigger ones there. So always smart to be looking at a bait. As far as forecasting where they're going to be, you know, that's when it's really important to have a network of people, because year over year conditions change. So really important is to, again, just have a network of people where you're getting that information. You're sharing it with them, they're sharing it back with you, and it helps everybody get better. Like one example was just this past weekend, we were down in Marco Island. James Sauer, he hosted a meetup with Insider Club members. You know, perfect example of how important just sharing and just having a network of fishermen who are helpful is. So we were down there. I had a whole game plan. I picked some spots that were really close to what I was having luck with in Charlotte Harbor. And we're down in 10,000 Islands, and to get there, and it was total dead zone. But on the way there, we actually saw some dead fish, and so it turns out some red tide is just starting to show itself down there, and it basically zapped the zone that I had targeted. That's like my whole game plan was totally shattered in like the first 20 minutes. But some of the guys in the group were fishing the day before, and they were just talking about how much mullet they saw, and they said where they were. And so, okay, like, at least I know that there's clean water there, like all the bait's there, odds are the predators are there too. And so sure enough, so instead of just sitting there and just trying to force catch some fish in that area that got hit by the red tide, which was where my game plan was, right? Like based on the engagement I had with some of the other members who were helpful, who were actually sharing some helpful information, you know, I knew exactly what to do next. And it wasn't like, okay, like, I'm not sure if this is going to work or not. You know, I had to drive like 10 miles to get there because it was totally opposite direction of where I went. But it wasn't a guessing game. Like, it wasn't a guessing game like what we used to do back in the day, Joe, where, you know, we'd have like 5 or 6 spots that we've caught fish before, but we literally had no rhyme or reason on why they were there when we caught them. And then, like, we really had no forecast of, hey, is this going to be good next time or is it not? So the network will really help fill that gap. So for those who don't yet have one, highly recommend getting one. And obviously, I'm biased, of course, but so far I've not seen anything close to what we have in the Insider Club. And so back to the story, though, I go out and make the change, and then sure enough, like, we still had a great day. I caught a slam, Snook reds, trout, plus we caught grouper, jacks, ladyfish, and Spanish mackerel. I think it was like 8 species, and all artificial lures. And that was, when that was fishing foreign area, and neither of us, I was fishing with James Sauer, and neither of us had fished any of those areas before. And we still had a great day. But what saved us was knowing the overall trends, first of all, but most importantly is just the network, is the real-time information. I would much rather hear some details on a trip that happened like yesterday than I would like having 10 years of historical reports from the same spot. Like, recency is way more important than year-over-year trends, because just like there's so many variables, and every year the weather's different. Like, the year-over-year stuff is something I put a lot of effort into for a long time, and it was like basically a waste. I wasted a lot of time and energy on that stuff. So
yeah, we wasted a lot of time on a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
too much tackle, tote, and Terry. Remember that one story? I came across it recently. We did it in a webinar, and we got a lot of comments about it. Remember, it was the rabbit story. Do you remember the rabbit story?
The rabbit story? I don't remember that.
Oh, the hunter and the hare. So this basically describes Luke and I and our dad for many, many years. It probably describes many of you, perhaps, in the past or even currently. And the story goes something like this. The hunter goes out and he's trying to bring, some dinner back for his family. And so he got a rifle. He's going out there and he's trying to hunt a rabbit. And he's sitting there and he's out in the forest and he's looking around, and all of a sudden he hears something coming like at him pretty quickly. And all of a sudden something busts out of the bush, and he's standing next to this tree, and he watches this rabbit literally go right into the tree, knocks himself out, and essentially is completely unconscious. So the hunter, kind of clubs him on the head real quick, didn't even have to shoot his rifle, and brings back home the rabbit. And so everyone's celebrating. It's a great day. His wife's like, "Oh, thank you, honey. That was faster than we thought it would take." And he's the hero for the day, right? He had a great hunt without even having to shoot his rifle. And so guess what he does, though? The next day he goes hunting again. And he goes back to the exact same spot, expecting the exact same results. And for 20 years, this dude, even though he explores a little bit, he always keeps circling back to that same tree, thinking, hoping, and praying and wishing that a rabbit's going to come do the same thing, or if not, that it's still going to come to that same path. Not once, like wondering, what, maybe it was just a lucky day for me. Maybe rabbits don't normally come down this path. Maybe rabbits don't normally completely run into trees. And that's so true of all of us. I had, Lawson Lindsay on the show, and we kind of laughed about his funny story where he was in this one spot and he caught a massive snook. And it was, looking back now, he knows based on trends and how snook behave, that it was a complete fluke, that snook should not have been in that spot. Yet for about a year straight, Lawson Lindsay went back to that exact same spot with same lure, same time of day, like scratching his head and wondering why the snook wasn't there. And so many of us do that. We're just like that hunter, stubborn and just kind of like hoping and praying and wishing that the same thing's going to happen when usually it doesn't. Do you remember that story now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Rabbit.
Yeah, I think everybody, we all do that. I think it's, I'm not embarrassed to admit it, because I think we all fall into that bucket. Some more than others. I feel like I was there for way too long. And when I'm not careful, I actually find myself doing it again. And it's something that we all need to be mindful of, that, hey, are you here just because you caught fish here like a few times? Or are you there because you actually know that there's an actual trend happening and you're in the right type of spot at the right time?
Yep.
So, yeah, I found that in many cases, I sometimes do the worst when I'm fishing areas that I go to a lot, because I just habitually just go to the same spots. Like, okay, like I've caught a ton of fish here. I'm just going to go because I trust it. without really factoring in, okay, like which way is the wind going, which way is the current going, what's the tide height, tide speed, and actually deciding, okay, like based on the conditions, is this a smart spot to go to, or is it not? So I think all of us are guilty of doing it, and regardless of how new or experienced we are.
All right. So if anyone made it this far, we're going to give one special tip. I haven't told Luke about this, but I am now. And so, Luke, if you were, let's just say it's this late fall, early winter time, if you had to go out there, let's just say you had someone new, like, Jacob and his dad, or a young person that had not done much inshore fishing, and you had to catch either redfish or trout. Let's take Snook out of the equation, because I know we got people that listen, Texas and Carolinas, Georgia, et cetera. If you had to catch either redfish or trout, where are you going? Like what kind of spot, depth, specific tide? What do you got?
Well, trout will be the easiest, and it would literally be like the same type of situation that I mentioned when Jacob was in town. Right, that was just like that's the textbook easy way to go out and catch a lot of fish. Is to just go out and find a channel of some sort that makes a little bit more current than anywhere else, like the general area around it. And so have some area that has a little bit of current flow, a little bit more than anywhere else, while also having some sort of structure on the bottom. Obviously, you want a little bit of depth change. Pretty much all channels automatically have that, because the current is sweeping a lot of the silt off the bottom. But if there's seagrass, that's a huge plus. If there's oysters or any kind of like shell, like hard shell, that's a plus as well. And then getting out there and paddle tails. And if lures, throw paddle tails, because everything eats them. And so I would literally, like, we were just drifting. Like, that one of the days, the trout was acting up, so we just drifted and caught a ton of fish. So you don't have to have like crazy good equipment. You don't have to have those smart trolling motors that you can move the boat around with a little bit from the back of the boat with that little controller. You can just go to a good spot, get upwind, get up current of the zone you want to go to, and just drift across it and have a lot of action. And again, the cool thing about it is trout will be there. You catch ladyfish, jacks, cobia, and tarpon are a possibility as well. So that would be my recommendation.
Cool.
And that, really that works most of the year, but like fall and winter, it definitely gets the job done too.
Cool, man. So what do you got the rest of the day? Unpacking, unboxing?
Yeah, I literally just got to the house, so do another truckload of stuff, get it set up, and almost there, getting close. Does
Otis like the new place?
Yeah, so far he's chewing. He just found a stick that he's eating right now. So he's a fan. There's a lot of stuff to explore around for him, so should be fun. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having everything set up, and a lot more experiments. I had a lot of requests for line experience, like those abrasion tests. I've had the device that I tested with in storage for like the last 3 months, so that's going to be coming out. I have a little area where I can break knots with easily. So a lot more videos coming out soon.
Cool. Yeah, and if you're an insider, once again, a lot of special stuff for you, and there'll be a lot of new reports in some brand new areas, and just a lot of really cool stuff coming up for 2020 here. So we're super pumped. Finally, everyone have a wonderful December, wonderful Christmas, depending on when you are listening to this. And all we ask in return is two things. One, come join us in the Insider Club. There's a reason we have over 10,000 members strong. And it ain't just for newbies. I saw someone had posted a question in a Facebook group about that, and some of the comments from people who were not members, just assuming, I think it's for new people. It is not. The majority of the members are pretty hardcore weekend warriors. People that own boats and or own really nice kayaks and are catching fish and just want to catch more, right? They just want to go maximize their time, that want to avoid having to go back to the same old 5 or 6 boring spots over and over and over again, and want to have the confidence to be able to predict where these feeding fish will be, and want to have a network that'll support them. So please join us in the Insider Club. And I think, Luke, we're a little over 10% of our members are full-time guides, and they're learning stuff every month. And they know the power of the network and are utilizing it for that. So that can all be found at saltstrong.com. And the other part is to give us a review and subscribe to this podcast. It helps out tremendously, helps us get amazing new guests, helps it make it worth it for us, since we never ask for any sponsorships or any of that kind of stuff. We, go right into it. We don't have 5 or 6 minutes of different ads that are being read by us. Some of those podcasts drive me crazy when the people are just sitting there reading ads for 5 or 6 minutes. I have no problem if it's just one, but good Lord, guys, some of you guys, podcasters, going on forever. So that's all we ask, guys. Join us in the Insider Club, and then leave us a review and subscribe to the Salt Strong Fishing Podcast. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one. Luke, can't wait to see the new house, dude.
Absolutely.
We be out. Peace.
Later.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul, it was pain.